Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Marvell Adams Jr., and I'm the CEO of Caregiver Action Network, a not-for-profit based in Washington, D.C. that supports caregivers, family caregivers all across the country in all 50 states with a whole host of resources that you'll hear more about later on. But for now, I just want to welcome everybody for today's session, which is entitled Connecting Through Challenges, Masterful Communication for Cognitive Support. And I'll do some introductions, but first, just wanted to go to the next slide and give a thank you out to our sponsors.
Marvell, I apologize. We're having some trouble with the slide advancing.
Oh, no. All right.
That may have happened sorry for everybody online with us. This happened as well last week. I'm going to stop my share and start it again. I apologize for the inconvenience.
No problem. I'd be shocked if no one on this Zoom understood technical difficulties. So it's just the world we're in right now.
But when you practice for it, don't you expect it to go better?
Nope, just the opposite.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thanks, Erin. So this is made possible through the great support of our partners at Lundbeck and Otsuka. I just really want to thank them for their dedication, support, and really tenacity when it comes to supporting individuals going through cognitive change and living with Alzheimer's. So thanks so much to Lundbeck and Otsuka. All right. So for today, just to give folks a quick grounding in what we're going to cover, we're going to do welcome and introductions, which I'll handle in just a second. But we're going to talk a little bit about neuropsychiatric symptoms or NPS in Alzheimer's disease. And I'll share you a little bit more about what that means so we can kind of ground ourselves in some of the science behind what we're going to talk about today. And then I'm going to turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Erin, to really talk about the heart of our conversation today, which is connecting through challenges. And then lastly, we will save space for closing remarks and Q&A. And so we encourage you throughout that if you have a question that comes up, either jot it down yourself and ask it later on, or throughout any of this presentation today, you can put a question in the Q&A, and our team that's working behind the scenes we'll make sure that we queue those up for answering as many of those as we can at the end of our session today. Already seeing people saying where they're from, so they've already gotten the assignment, Erin, that you're going to be asking them about anyway. So I love it. So
Fantastic.
today I'm really excited to be working again with someone that I've known since I was in my 20s, and I won't tell you how old I am now, but since I was in my
Wow.
20s, I know,
Oh
I
my
know. Uh,
gosh.
Yep, yep. And so Erin Bonito is the founder and lead coach of Gemini Consulting. I will leave it to you guys to be able to look at her bio because it is quite impressive. But what I'll say to you is personally is that I learned and got to know Erin many years ago and really gained such an insightful and long-lasting understanding and quite frankly, um, compelling, thoughtful, and compassionate approach to learning how to communicate with individuals whose brains are changing in how they work. And that change can be due to a disease like Alzheimer's and several others that may affect the cognition of the brain. But Erin, really, I consider a mentor, a friend, and a colleague that opened my eyes to things that I really was not aware of when it came to understanding individuals that were navigating cognitive changes in their brain. So, Erin, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm happy to
And
be here. Thank you.
Yeah, this is cool. And as I mentioned before, my name is Marvell Adams Jr. I'm the CEO of Caregiver Action Network. So that's enough about me. So,
Well,
Erin, oh, hold on just a sec. Oh, yeah, I guess go right ahead, Erin.
all right. So thank you, Marvell. Those are kind words. I'd forgotten our youthful ages when we first collaborated. You more
Yeah,
youthful than
it's
me,
quite a
but
while ago.
only by a little bit. So
Yeah, yeah.
here is, what I say. I'm a dementia communication coach. What does that mean? It means that, hmm, okay, for a few decades now, I guess we'll leave it there, Marvell. I've spent most of my time in places where there are people experiencing dementia. I've spent my time in skilled nursing homes, assisted living centers, memory care centers. I've spent my time with home health care staff. I've spent my time with families and community members as well. And while I'm there, occasionally I'm teaching a class, like in a classroom, but most of the time I'm doing hands-on dementia communication coaching, which means helping each person be the very best dementia communicator that they can be in that moment. And my philosophy is that whether I am working with a housekeeper who's learning to come into someone's room and take their laundry without causing alarm or anxiety, or whether I'm working with a nurse who is trying to give medication in a challenging situation, or whether I'm working with a wife who's coming to visit her husband and just desperately wants to connect with him in some small way. Regardless of who I'm working with, my philosophy is that as care partners, we are all doing the very, very best that we can with the skills that we have. A little bit about my caregiving story. And I only learned in the last maybe year or so that I have a caregiving story. I always thought of myself as someone who supported caregivers, but I know each of you has a caregiving story as well. So I'll share a little bit of mine. My caregiving story started when I was 16, not voluntarily, through parental control, parental suggestion. I started working at a small nursing home in our town where I worked as a dietary aide. I worked there for 3 years after school, and I don't believe I would have called myself a caregiver. But in retrospect, knowing which each person who wanted their sandwiches cut diagonally, or who wanted them cut the regular way, or who didn't want them cut at all, or knowing who wanted that double scoop of mashed potatoes and who only wanted just a tiny bit. In fact, learning
Hmm.
those nuances for each person that we served is an example of being a caregiver. I know that you know all the little things that make your care partner tick. You're that person. When I went to college, I had a job that they paid in cash. So I'm not sure how legitimate of a place this was, but I, 2 days a week, lived in a small home with 5 men who had Alzheimer's disease and then got my cash payment. I don't think this happens anymore. Of course, this was in the late 80s, early 90s. But being there alone with those 5 fellows with Alzheimer's disease taught me, I think, everything I know today, almost everything I know about how to be a good care partner and a good communicator to that person. Um, Personally, I became a mom several years ago through adoption. And I like to say that I became a mom in very dramatic fashion. My husband and I adopted our son and daughter at the same time. Our daughter was 5, our son was 2, and we didn't speak the same language. And it's very, I say dramatic, it's impactful to suddenly have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old and not speak the same language. Additionally, our kids had their fair share of moderate medical things that needed to be attended to and needed to be taken care of. At the time, I would have said, well, I'm a mom. Like going to all these doctor's appointments, that's what a mom does. Or taking these stool samples to the lab every single week for 3 months. Well, that's what a mom does. Or making sure my kids take this medicine morning, noon, and night. That's what a mom does. It's only been in the last couple of years that I learned that no, that's what a caregiver does. That's what a care partner does. I'd never, thought about myself in that way. During the pandemic, I certainly did start to call myself a caregiver or care partner. Early in the pandemic, my dad experienced quite an acute episode with his congestive heart failure. He was hospitalized for 10 days. And after that hospitalization, my dad was cognitively never the same again. My dad definitely experienced dementia through the end of his life. Because it was the pandemic, I was not traveling like I normally do. I was close to home. His nursing home was about 3 or 4 blocks from where I live. And then I took the mantle. I took the label. I'm a caregiver. I'm a care partner. And so much of what I'll share today goes back to some experiences with my dad because this title, Connecting Through Challenges, I'm going to tell you today about times that I connected with my dad, but we would have to have much longer webinar if I were going to tell you about the challenges. Suffice to say, my dad did have a lot of challenges that come with dementia. So I'll ask our chat box facilitators. I'm a little bit curious who all is here, whether we have professionals, family caregivers. What is your caregiving story?
You know, Erin, I saw as things were coming in that people are definitely from all over the country. We have husbands, family caregivers, long distance care partners, patient advocates, social workers, family caregivers for their moms, parents, um, some professionals right here from my state of Maryland, some caring for their dad, many family caregivers that have shown up today, many of which that I'm sure have roles that may or may not have anything to do with caregiving for their professional lives, or some that may have had to, take a step back from what they've called their kind of traditional work life in order to be caregivers. But overwhelmingly, what we see in the chat are family caregivers that are caring for loved ones, some multi-generational across that as well, and an amazing diversity of individuals when it comes to geography and caregiver role. So pretty cool.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad that you could make time in your caregiving life for this. I know time is precious, so thank you.
So what I'm going to do for just a few minutes is kind of ground us a little bit in, what are we talking about? And this is not me, getting into necessarily the science behind Alzheimer's disease, but more so trying to understand when we're talking about symptoms, because that's really what we are managing as caregivers. We are managing the manifestation of what we're seeing outwardly of the individual that we are supporting. Their clinical team, their care team, their care circle may be handling things that are happening internally for the person regarding the disease. So when we talk about NPS or neuropsychiatric symptoms in Alzheimer's, you're talking about the common symptoms that you see in affecting up to 97% of individuals that are living with and navigating Alzheimer's disease, and that's according to the National Institute of Health. So these symptoms can include things that, quite frankly, what you would expect that any human can experience. So depression, anxiety, agitation, aggression. Aggression, I always hesitate to say, Erin, as I know you do as well, because as
Right.
you'll learn, our conversation today is that, many of the things that we may refer to as a behavior, or many things we may refer to as aggression, are quite natural things when you put them in the context that we're humans caring for humans. You're going to hear us talk about that a lot. But understanding that apathy can be a part of that, hallucinations and delusions can be a part of that as well. But the impact is really what I think shows up for many of the hundreds of caregivers that have joined us today. So the reduced quality of life, the increased mortality, and then the higher hospitalization rates. And again, one of my words I don't like too much, but institutionalization, meaning that someone is going to a residential a setting that is outside of perhaps the home that they called home, or perhaps outside of the home of their caregiver. And then certainly, and we talk about this a lot as a Caregiver Action Network, elevated caregiver distress and particularly healthcare costs. I mean, planning for, dealing with, and quite frankly, navigating the financial conundrum that comes along with being a caregiver. That's a whole nother webinar for us that we've done plenty on. Check out our website for more resources. But, there are possible causes behind NPS or neuropsychiatric symptoms: pain, depression, or stress. And you can imagine that that becomes very important when you're talking about not being able to effectively communicate with someone. Pain, depression, and stress are much more difficult to figure out what's going on with someone if they cannot tell you, if they cannot verbalize and answer a certain set of questions, sleep disturbances and constipation. And so the pain that can go along with not having a good night's sleep, I think everyone can relate to that, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. I myself thought to myself, like, this is, third grade and we have a test tomorrow. And so last night I was thinking, I got to get a good night's sleep. I got to get a good breakfast because I got to be on this webinar today. But sleep disturbances can be a huge part of what causes NPS. Environmental changes, and so unfamiliar places or routines. And you remember we just talked about that individuals that are navigating Alzheimer's disease or other cognitive conditions, perhaps needing to move, whether it's from their home to a loved one's home or to a new place setting. Medication interactions, loneliness and loss of feeling of loss. That is a big part of what we're talking about when it comes to NPS symptoms, because it's not the softer side, it's not the unseen side, it is the deep rooted emotions that we feel when it comes to isolation and loneliness that may be caused by Alzheimer's disease. And then overstimulation. And again, something that I think most humans can understand. The noise, the crowds, the exhaustion that can come from being around a lot of people or not being able to be in control over the stimulus that's coming your way. Again, very naturally, I think any of us would have difficulty around that. But when it comes to all of this, this is one way of grounding in the fact that, you aren't alone in figuring out these symptoms. So there's an amazing tool that we want to connect you with. It's called the Agitation and Alzheimer's Screener for Caregivers, AASC. And so this is a tool designed to help caregivers identify and assess agitation and Alzheimer's, individuals that have Alzheimer's. You can learn more by going to www.theaasc.com. So we would highly encourage you to take a look at that, because, this really is a tool that, in my opinion, it's something that's so monumentally helpful for caregivers, because you don't know necessarily that, is this normal? Is this abnormal? Is this what most people feel? And also understanding that, is this something that I need to be worried about when it comes to my loved one, in between, those explanations maybe at the doctor's office. Erin, could you flick us to the next slide? Perfect. So I also want to just talk about non-pharmacological interventions, because the interesting thing about our talk today is that we really are talking about not prescription medications. We're not talking about over-the-counter medication. We really are talking about what can you do as a caregiver? What can you learn and understand to help you better communicate with individuals that may be expressing or having symptoms. So, non-pharmacological interventions that Erin's going to talk about, they benefit individuals, care partners, caregivers by reducing stress, fewer side effects compared to medications for the individuals that have NPS, and then enhancing the quality of life for individuals that are living with NPS and Alzheimer's. So just to give you a sense of what we mean by that, and we certainly will talk about other things as we go through, but just a real quick grounding that exercise, for many of you out there, exercise, if you had to skip a day, I think this was the case, with I'd heard a story with President Obama that if he did not get a run in on the treadmill or run in the morning, his whole day was shot. And so exercise being an important part of cognitive stimulation. So puzzles, games, social activities. Some of you may have joined us for our Stronger Memory webinar we did recently that talks about those types of cognitive stimuli. Reminiscence therapy, which is exactly what you would expect. And we'll talk, Erin will get a little bit more into that. Music therapy. God Almighty, we all know that music has such a huge part of our lives. And you can imagine that the songs you grew up as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, those remain with you for a very long time. And you can imagine in your older years that those things can perhaps bring you back to a place that you found elusive previously. Art therapy, animal therapy, again, these are core pieces of really who we are when it comes to engaging, connecting with folks. And of course, comforting environment. What does it mean to have a routine that is consistent, and so that there is not necessarily disruption in what the cadence may be in a person's day within reason, soothing music, familiar objects, and of course, natural light. So all of these things are non-pharmacological interventions. But the cool part about our talk with Erin today is that I'm just really excited to see that each of these will be amazing ways for us to open up dialogue around connecting with individuals, through challenges. So. With that, Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I won't promise to stay on the sidelines. I might jump in from time to time with a chat here and there. So I'll take it to
Jump in
you.
all you want, Marvell. Thank you. And thank you for
Thanks.
that grounding introduction. I thought that was so helpful to summarize the pieces of what we'll be touching on today and what's so important for all caregivers to know. We're going to start here, though, by talking about memory in general. I want to define what we are talking about today and what we are not talking about today. So we're going to go through some definitions, some language, and some key concepts for today's discussion. And before we get into the discussion too much, I want you to find a little piece of paper, just any scrap of paper nearby, a little pen, a little pencil, because I'm going to give each one of you your own personalized memory test. I hope you're ready. Uh, I would do, if we were together, of course, I'd have you raising your hands and sharing all sorts of examples. So I'm trusting you to make these marks on your piece of paper. I'm going to ask you to think back to the last 12 months of your life. And in the last 12 months, I would like you to make a mark if even one time you've misplaced a set of keys. I bet a lot of you are making your marks. Make a mark if even one time you've gone shopping at a large place like a Costco or a Target and you have temporarily misplaced your whole vehicle. That happens to me probably once a week. Make a mark if even one time you've had a conversation like this with your friend and it's, hey, you've got to see that movie. It's that one with, that guy. He was on that show. Make a mark if you've had that conversation even once in the last 12 months. Make a mark if even one time in the last 12 months you saw somebody that you know the person, and you have to walk up and do a, hey, you, how's everybody? And finally, make a mark if even one time in the last 12 months you've gotten up from your chair, you've walked right into the other room to get yourself a something. If you're like me, and I bet that you are, you have quite a few marks already on your piece of paper. When folks are aging, here's what experts, physicians, researchers call it. They call these moments age associated memory impairment, AAMI. It sounds very serious. It's really not. So if you had a piece of paper, a handout in front of you, which I know you don't, but if you did, I would say just cross that off. We're not going to say age associated memory impairment. We're not going to say AAMI. We're going to say what most folks experiencing it call it: senior moments. That's what my mom calls it. That's what her friends call it. These are the temporary lapses in memory in otherwise healthy adults. Some of you, though, are saying, whoa, wait, I'm not senior yet. I am young, or I'm middle aged. I am late middle aged. There are other reasons for these lapses in memory. It can be that we're tired, it can be stress, it can be too many details in life. But this is the normal forgetfulness of everyday life. Our brain isn't designed to hold on to every single piece of information that comes in. These temporary lapses in memory are very different than dementia. And I imagine so many of you are on the call today because you know someone with dementia. You know that dementia is life-changing. These little senior moments, they're nuisances, they're annoying, but they're not life-changing. We can look to a textbook definition of dementia, and I don't spend a lot of time on the textbook definition, but just here we go. It's memory impairment, and I would add to that definition. I would add significant memory impairment and one of the following cognitive difficulties, such as language difficulties. My dad had a pattern that's pretty typical with dementia. He would say, "Give me that, you know." And I'm going to use my dad's real language today. Like, give me that damn thing. You know what I mean? And, he didn't have the word anymore for, his cup or his glass. The person may experience impaired ability to conduct motor activities. I don't know anyone with mid or late stage dementia that can tie their shoes. that kind of a motor activity that comes so naturally to us for so much of our life, erodes away. It can be failure identifying or recognizing objects. Working in residential settings, I can't tell you how many times I see a person with dementia come to the front desk and they say, "This phone isn't working. I can't call my daughter. This phone isn't working." And in fact, it's not a phone, it's their remote control. And then again, disturbances in intellectual functioning. Looking back, of course, hindsight is 2020. But in my dad's experience, before he sort of formally was diagnosed with dementia, before his event, he had replaced his laptop computer one time per year, one new laptop each year. And I'm telling you, this is a frugal man of his generation who would not be one to spend money on laptops, but he was sure that each one was a lemon. He was sure that each one didn't work. He was sure those Best Buy guys were trying to sell him junk. And in fact, of course, it was my dad's own changes in intellectual functioning. So, all of this to say, of course, dementia is nothing like senior moments. Senior moments are a nuisance, a little bit embarrassing, while dementia, of course, is life changing. Now, when I use the word dementia, I'd like to be careful about how I use this. I want you to know that dementia is a word for, it's an umbrella term for a whole cluster of symptoms, like the symptoms that I just mentioned to you. There's no such thing as the disease of dementia. It's just a word describing those symptoms. There's always something causing the person to have dementia. That cause oftentimes is Alzheimer's disease. I believe it's estimated in the United States somewhere between 60 and 80% of all cases of dementia are caused by Alzheimer's disease. It could be a vascular cause, like the person having had a stroke or mini strokes. This umbrella is not a complete representation of the many, many causes of dementia. The Alzheimer's Association and the Caregiver Action Network are two really great resources where you can find about the many possible causes of dementia. I'm still going to talk a little bit more about language. In recent years, I find myself saying dementia less and saying cognitive differences a little bit more. And I think today you will hear me flip back and forth sometimes between Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive differences. My experiences outside of healthcare with the word dementia are not good. And I bet a lot of you would say the same thing. In slang, you'll hear offhand, "Oh, he's so demented. That guy is demented." And demented meaning crazy or unhinged or out of control or irrational. I did a search last night. I was also like thinking I was in the third grade and preparing for the webinar today. And I searched, and sure enough, there's two movies, The Demented, and they're both horror movies.
Erin, I have to say, like that Caregiver Action Network is a part of a coalition of not-for-profit organizations that support, advocate, and work in the space of Alzheimer's and dementia. But we are working to really work out of our vernacular the word dementia because of the reasons you're talking about. And I have to tell you, we internally started that change about a month ago, and it is so difficult, and it's not because a lack of wanting, but is, in the sense of when you get so used to using a term, but also understanding that everything you're going to talk about today, everything I've learned for the last 20-ish, plus years, is that, it really is a word that has had its time, but there are better ways to describe what's going on with folks. And so thank you so much for mentioning this, because when it comes down to understanding that there really is a change in this person's brain that should be no more seen as bad or negative than if someone's brain changed because of cancer or because of a stroke or because of anything else that can happen, positive or negative, that understands that, this person's changing in the way their brain functions means that we have a responsibility to learn how to communicate with them, which is what I really like the beauty of today's conversation, because that cognitive difference that we have between one another, there's nothing to say that my cognition, because I don't have Alzheimer's, does not mean that I don't have cognitive differences. I so certainly do. We won't get into that at webinar today.
Right.
Recognizing that we all do. And how do we change our vernacular? How do we change our communication in a way that can get through and talk to individuals with these cognitive differences that are specific to someone that may be navigating Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive impairment?
I appreciate that, Marvell. And like you, trying to work the word dementia out of my teaching and out of, I guess, my job title and what I do,
Mm-hmm.
it's challenging, but the words that we use do influence how we think, even in a medical setting. Um, I had a time in my life when I was helping assist people with dementia to the doctor's office. And there would oftentimes be this quick between the nurse and the doctor, oh, he's demented. Oh, demented. And I think about how we've evolved in our use of other language. There might have been a time decades ago when we said about someone who has substance use disorder, we might have said, oh, well, he's a drunk or he's a user. And these labels do nothing but diminish a person. They do nothing but take away their humanity. It's a
Yep.
person with dementia, a person with substance use disorder. The person is at the center of this. And in the years that I've been doing this, so often I've increasingly been asked to share these communication skills for audiences who are working with folks who experience psychosis, or folks who experience autism spectrum disorder, or folks who experience ADHD. And at first I deferred. I thought, well, I'm not an expert in these types of things, but I've greatly warmed to the idea, and I've had really some terrific experiences coaching and teaching because it's all just a cognitive difference. Exactly what Marvell said. Whether it's dementia or whether it's psychosis or whether it's autism, it's just there's differences in processing external and internal stimuli. And I don't think it's limited to people who have these particular diagnoses, like Marvell said. I think we all have cognitive differences in how we process external and internal stimuli. So again, you'll hear me today a few times at least trying to speak more about cognitive differences. But here are our key concepts for today's discussion. Concept number one, because the person has difficulty creating new memories, it's going to impact our communication with the person. We may think that, of course, this person knows us. We just spoke to him yesterday, or he just saw us this morning, or we just bumped into each other a little while ago. Of course, this person should know us. Maybe not. Maybe they didn't create the memory of that interaction. Oftentimes, I see um, caregivers, professional and family, who believe the person is trying to be difficult when in fact they're not trying to be difficult at all. They're just operating with a different set of information than we have. Marvell has touched on this, but the words behavior and inappropriate behavior are really exceptionally, I cannot emphasize this enough, problematic. These words are problematic.
Yeah.
All
No,
behavior is communication.
yes. Friend, you speak my mind. All behavior is communication. Everything we do every day. And many times when we're talking about these interactions, from the experiences you've exposed me to, over my career, is that they also are very logical, responses to stimuli or engagement. So if you are helping someone with their meal, you're a caregiver helping alone with their meal in whatever way you may do that, and you are going back and forth to the kitchen, you're trying to do stuff. So in between bites, you're just going and you're standing over the person, you're walking back and forth. I got to tell you, I don't care who you are, what lived experience you have, what cognitive difference you may have, that is going to be agitating. If you can imagine in a restaurant, a server came over to you, every 5 minutes, checking on you for meal and was standing over you, and you would feel anxious. I'm feeling anxious right now thinking about it. And so when we talk about inappropriate behavior, that's another thing to kind of get to the side. And I love that you have this slide, Aaron, because really you're talking about humans caring for humans and the interactions and engagements that can take place. and how do we make those more successful? And it doesn't lead to success by saying, oh, you're wrong, I'm right. And the way you did that is based on your disease and nothing else, and I can discount it. No, they're responding to you as a human. And so perhaps you can change your approach.
Exactly. And sometimes I'll get an eye roll or two when I'm coaching, but someone might say, "Well, what do we do about Joe? Joe always hits us when we're trying to give a shower." And now I don't want the care partner to be hurt, clearly. I'm not suggesting that I like that, but I do like, if I'm being honest, that Joe is using his remaining abilities to tell us something. He's telling us clearly something's wrong. He's afraid of something, or something hurts, or he's embarrassed, or he doesn't understand what's happening. um, the person is using all their remaining abilities to tell us something. And if we fall into the habit of saying, oh, he always does that, he always hits during showers, or she always purses her lips shut and won't take the spoon of food, well, then that means we always are missing something, because all of this is meaningful, rational communication. And finally, our key concept is that our everyday communication patterns do not work for persons with dementia or other cognitive differences, even if we're communicating in a way that's very pleasant or very professional or very kind. Our communication style may be the trigger, the thing that's triggering the challenging behavioral symptoms and stressful interactions. And we're going to see some examples of that in this next section. As we move forward to part B, we're going to look at a person who has difficulty creating new memories. I'll tell you a little bit more about this person in the next slide. We're going to look at helpful responses that actually can be unhelpful and what to do instead. Before we move further, I have to tell you, I mentioned that I became a mom in dramatic fashion all those years ago. My children have grown. My children, I have one child in college and one child in high school. And when they were in middle school, it was about when the pandemic hit. And suddenly I had to learn how to teach through this tiny little peephole on my computer. And I'd always taught live. I'd always done role plays live, and I didn't know what to do. So and when they were middle schoolers, I just flat out bribed my kids to help me with these role plays. And I didn't have to bribe my husband. Like he would do that for me, but I bribed my kids. We recently updated our role plays, and this time it wasn't so much of a bribe as it was just they just set out exactly the payment that they wanted for each part. So um, they
Good for them.
good for them, right? So let's talk about someone who's experiencing short-term memory loss. You may have heard someone say, well, you never gave me any breakfast. I haven't had a thing to eat. And there's the crumb plate right in front of them. Or nobody told me I can't drive my car. I can drive my car right now if I want to. And in fact, the person hasn't had their keys for months. Or I didn't go to the music program. Nobody even told me about it. Those are all evidence of this person who couldn't create that memory. And oftentimes, our instinct when we hear that is to remind and reassure the person. We want to jog their memory. We might say to the person who believes she hasn't had any breakfast, we might say, well, you already had breakfast, remember? I gave it to you myself. Or it might be the wife saying to her husband, well, the doctor said you aren't supposed to drive anymore, remember? Or it might be the care partner in a residential setting saying, well, it's not safe for you to live alone anymore ever since you fell, remember? It might be the wife saying, I come here every single day. I always come and see you, remember? That comes from a genuine desire to be helpful, right? It comes from a genuine desire to connect with the person, to remind and to reassure. But it's usually not a helpful response. So what we want to do instead is, I think it's important when we're uh, communicating with people who have cognitive challenges, cognitive differences, let's just eliminate "don't you remember," or "remember," or that. Because trying to force the person's memory recall, even if we're doing it, well, I say by friendly force, even by friendly force, It's asking the person to do something that this little piece of their brain in Alzheimer's disease, that little piece is the hippocampus, that it can't do anymore. So
You
leading
know,
up and
I'm sorry
oh,
because I can't help myself on this on that
no,
one
go
because
ahead.
it's again another reminder that if right now you said to me, Marvell, we met 20 years ago in whatever, Rochester, New York, and yada yada yada. And I said, I don't remember that. And you just said to me, oh, sure you do. And you just told me again. I'm like, well, I don't really remember that, Erin. And you sold me again and then made it really clear that you felt it was my fault that this interaction was not going well. I could have all my faculties, yeah, and be pretty pissed of her action. But we do this with individuals that don't necessarily have control over the changes going on in their brain, and expect to get an outcome that's going to be successful. And that really, is not highly likely if we continue that same approach. So, in grounding us and understanding that these are really still grounded in humans and their interaction, I just that point I just couldn't let go past. So thanks for making sure to remind us that reminding is not necessarily the course of action.
I appreciate that. And do you remember it was in baggage claim at the Rochester airport?
I did pick you up, didn't I?
Yes,
It's true.
it's
It's
true.
true. It's true. I did pick you up.
Yeah, thank you. So, why did I tell you all about my children requiring payment for this webinar? Well, you're about to find out. We're going to show a video made here in our family room about what this reminding and reassuring might look like. So, here's the person that we're going to describe. This is a person experiencing dementia. She lives with her adult daughter and family, so adult daughter and grandkids. This woman is early in dementia. Her language skills are still quite strong. Um, but what's probably the most salient symptom at this point is her mood and behavior changes. She frequently says very unkind things, and she wasn't that kind of a person in her life. I mean, she may have had a remark or two, but they weren't remarks sprinkled dozens of times a day. Um, Her tone seems especially sharp a lot of the time. And that's different. That's a greatly increased intensity from the kind of person that her family knew. And she's having increasing difficulty forming new memories. So, this is the person that my daughter will actually portray. Um, Now, about the caregiver. That will be my part. Oh, she is the primary caregiver for her mother. She juggles caregiving for her mom. She's raising teenagers. She holds a full time job. I'm guessing a lot of you can relate to a description like that. In this role play, we're going to look at the daughter trying to remind her mom that she had given her breakfast. What I want you to know in this role play is I'm exaggerating the caregiver part just a bit. I'm exaggerating maybe her stress, or I'm exaggerating perhaps her speed. But I'm exaggerating intentionally because sometimes when we hold a mirror up and it's just slightly exaggerated, we can see ourselves and our own struggles in it just a little bit more clearly. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm accusing care partners of being this rushed or this stressed in this exaggerated fashion, but we know within it there are nuggets of reality. So that's your assignment, is to identify a few nuggets of reality as you're watching this, and maybe identify what the daughter did or didn't do that inadvertently escalated the situation. So here goes.
All right, Mom, do you have everything you need before I head to work?
Some breakfast would be nice.
Mom, you got your breakfast right there. I can't find my phone. Where is it?
This must be your damn husband's.
Mom, Rick left hours ago. That is not his breakfast. That's the breakfast I gave you. Remember? Eggs, toast, orange juice, coffee like you get every day, remember? Where's my
A
phone?
dog wouldn't even eat this.
Mom, for heaven's sakes, it's fine. It's what you get every day. Remember, I make you this. It's your favorite. You like a light breakfast. I have to get to work, okay?
You're not going out in this snow, young lady.
Mother, who's gonna pay the bills around here? My boss isn't giving me a snow day. I've gotta go, okay? Listen, Julian is here. He's just in the other room. He will take care of you. He doesn't have school today. He's gonna be home the whole day, okay?
So as we look at that, some things that come to mind for me, people ask me, how do you come up with these role plays? Well, I don't come up with them. It's things I've observed thousands and thousands of times. Most often I observe this in residential settings. Most often it is a professional caregiver. It's a well-intentioned aide saying, we brought you breakfast. Yeah, the cook said we brought you breakfast. You had your breakfast. But when I present this at family conferences, I've had so many people come up to me and say, I feel like you were in my kitchen. And you see, what was happening there is this woman believed that she'd been served somebody else's dirty crumb plate. And just like the example that Marvell had used in the restaurant, if you were at a restaurant or in someone's home and they served you another person's dirty crumb plate, you would be annoyed. You would be quite frustrated. And the more and more that person tried to remind you, you would probably feel indignant. I'm curious if you'd like to use the chat box. Did you see some nuggets of reality in your situation? And did you identify some of the things that the daughter did or didn't do that inadvertently escalated the situation?
Hi, Erin. I am watching the chat, and there's some really fantastic feedback about the daughter being dismissive of the mother's concern. There was also a daughter rushed and not focusing on mom, maybe not really listening to kind of, some of those nuanced pieces that you so brilliantly have kind of spelled out in this section. There was a question that came through the chat that I thought was really relevant here. And it wanted to specify, when we are reacting as caregivers in some of these moments, you know, we talk a lot about caregiver stress, burnout, fatigue. And I didn't know if you wanted to maybe touch a little bit on that and how that can impact reactions, and um, how as a caregiver we may be able to take a few moments to kind of recognize when we may be going into reacting out of stress, burnout, fatigue.
Nicole, I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate the comments and I appreciate that bringing up the topic of caregiver stress. I intentionally described this caregiver as someone who was raising teenagers and caring for her mom and had a full-time job. She's living with caregiver stress, right? And that is bound to impact her communications. In a few slides, though, we're going to go through some strategies for how she can recognize that and then bring it down. I appreciate that. And what I'd like to say on this is when we are reminding and reassuring, even though it's not intentional, when we say, that's your breakfast, I gave it to you, that's your favorite. Even though it's not intentional, in a way, we're calling the person a liar. And if you've been called a liar, you're going to have a greatly escalated situation. So what strategies can we use to connect through this challenge? I'm going to give you examples. This example, of course, will be in the home setting, but these are examples that we coach frequently in residential settings. And I want you to listen for the very genuine apology that the daughter provides. I want you to watch for the intentional dementia communication skills. And I want you to identify the moments of genuine connection.
All right, Mom, is there anything you need before I head out for work?
Some breakfast would be nice.
Oh, ooh. Well, you didn't get much there, did you?
You set this dirty plate in front of me, probably your damn husband's.
Ooh. You know, it sounds like something Rick would do.
Sounds like him.
Maybe the dog would eat it.
Not even a dog would eat that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I am so sorry. I can't believe I was gonna run off and not feed you.
You ought to be.
I'm sorry, Mom. Oh, I've had so much on my mind. Tell you what, I don't think I have time to make a full, good breakfast, but I can get you a blueberry muffin or a nice glazed donut.
Well, donut wouldn't hurt.
A donut never hurts.
Never.
All right, let me go grab you a donut. I'm so sorry, Mom. I can't believe this.
Alrighty.
Okay. One lovely donut for my lovely mother.
Thank you. You've always been a good girl.
I try. I learn from the best. You have a good day, Mom.
You too, honey.
All right. Love you.
I love you too.
All right. You keep an eye on him.
I'll try my best.
He's ready to pick up your crumbs. All right. Love you.
Love you too.
So connecting through the challenge sounds like this. Oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry I didn't get you any breakfast. But I can find you something good. Or for my dad, it was, oh, you should be mad about driving your car. Or not driving the car. I'd be mad too. I am so sorry, Dad. You've been driving since you could see over the wheel. For I think of a wife visiting a husband or partner visiting a partner. For my mom, she'd walk in, and the first thing my dad would do is kind of blast her because she hadn't been visiting, and which would put her in a defensive position, wanting to explain that yes, she had been visiting and she was doing her best and all of these things. A much better approach is to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you've been missing me. I've been missing you too. All of these examples are examples of genuinely connecting through this challenge. And I'm going to come back to, no, I'm just going to stay right here. But I'll say this, there were other things that the caregiver did. And I don't think I have a chat box mentioned right here, but I'd love to see you pop into the chat box quickly and share what were some of the intentional communication skills that you saw the daughter use in the second round.
Hi, Erin. So I'm so glad that you mentioned some of the other components that some of the folks watching picked up on. One thing that a lot of people were sounding off in the chat was the direct one-on-one touch, the hand holding, really taking that moment to be connected in a direct eye contact. I saw that mentioned a few times in the chat. And so I wanted to make sure to bring that up because I thought that that was something that really stood out to a lot of the folks watching.
Right. Thank you for that. And you notice she got at her mother's eye level. She wasn't standing over. You notice that she didn't talk nearly as quickly. There were lots of pauses in the way she talked. And those are the skills, and the skills are important. But there's an emotional realness and an emotional energy. I say that memory work is energy work. And masterful communication for cognitive support, it's more than just stepping into the person's reality. The daughter could have said, oh, okay, I'll get you another breakfast, or oh, okay, I'll get you a donut. Well, that's half of it, stepping into this person's reality, but it's fully validating the person's emotion. If the person's mad, validating that anger. If they're worried, validating that worry. The two pieces together, this is compassionate caregiving. And sometimes when I'm working with families, there will be, I think of a family I worked with, not unlike other families, but the son would say, mom needs to know that dad is dead. She needs to know we're not going to lie to her about this. Well, in fact, if mom believes in her heart of hearts that she's middle-aged and dad is out there working in the field and dad just hasn't come in yet from the field and he must have decided to get in a few more rotations, well, then I say, we're not lying. we're stepping into this person's truth.
Mhm.
Sometimes we hear the word therapeutic fib. I despise that word. I think it's such a terrible description of what we're doing. And, fib, of course, lie is right in that. But we're not lying. We're stepping into this person's truth, which is much more compassionate, a compassionate way to say it, I think. I'd like to move on to part C. In this scenario, we're going to see someone who has language processing difficulties and has difficulty immediately placing or immediately recognizing a person. It's someone who just needs that extra beat, so to speak. So about this person, he lives in an assisted living um, facility. He's got some subtle changes to his language processing, but there are changes. He's having a harder and harder time processing the words that people say. He's having a harder time immediately recognizing familiar people. Also, we're going to add in a little nuance that there's been a lifelong emotional distance between him and his daughter. There's never was a very warm or affectionate relationship. And the daughter now finds herself in retirement age. She had hoped to move south, but that hasn't quite happened. She finds herself her dad's primary caregiver. And I'm telling you, this woman is doing her best. But she's easily stressed and she's easily worn down. And I know that there are so many of us on this call who can relate to that feeling of trying to do our best, but being so stressed and being so worn down. Again, I'll exaggerate slightly in order to hold that mirror up. Your assignment will be to identify within that exaggeration what are some of the nuggets of reality, and also identifying what the daughter did or didn't do that may have inadvertently created stress. The person is portrayed by my husband, and he did not request a paycheck for playing this part.
Dad, aren't you ready to go?
What are you doing here?
Dad, the cardiologist appointment. Remember, I called you this morning. I said you have to be ready by 3:30. The appointment's at 4.
What cardiologist?
Dad, Dr. Anderson. See, I wrote it on the calendar. The 9th, 4 o'clock. Maria told me she called you up a little while ago and she reminded you, remember?
I'm having my tea.
Well, Dad, you're going to have your tea a little bit.
No! Let it go!
Dad, listen. Okay, we have to get going. It's a little snowy outside. I want to give us a little extra time, okay?
Hey, be careful with that. Mom made it.
Yep, Dad, I know Mom made it. Listen, okay, we have got to get going. Okay, Dad? Can you let me have the tea?
No.
Here, well, let's put
My tea.
Okay, Dad, I'll get you some tea after the appointment. Here, let's get your shoes on, okay? Let's get your shoes on.
Not going anywhere.
Dad, please, come on.
No. Leave me alone.
So as we see the video and even as we look at the still photo, I think I am watching the time carefully and I may be going slightly over. We're going to not use the chat box this time. I mean, feel free to use it, but we won't be commenting on it. I bet you saw some nuggets of reality again, that she was stressed, she was in a hurry, and that she did not really take his feelings into consideration at all. She was leading with her agenda. She inadvertently created that stress also by standing over him, by having a poor and stressed facial expression, her body language. All of that communicated like, I'm in charge and I'm stressed and I'm frustrated. And because memory work is energy work, she received back the exact same energy that she put out. So let's look at her using some intentional communication skills for cognitive differences. She won't be standing over him. She won't be going so fast. And she won't be having that sort of scolding or almost indignant attitude about her. Your assignment in this next video is I want you to watch for the daughter when she catches that her dad does not immediately know which daughter she is. There's a moment. And I will say for my personal life, I had role played this thousands or hundreds of times before my own dad had dementia, not knowing that one day we would live that out almost every day. My sister and I look a lot alike, and there's that catch. And we learned ways to graciously save him from embarrassment. And so watch for that catch. And I want you to watch for the daughter's intentional use of humor to ease the interaction. She may be feeling very stressed, but she's taken some time ahead of time to think, okay, I'm coming in light. I'm going to keep some jokes flowing, and we'll see how this goes.
Hello, hi, Dad.
What are you doing here?
Oh, Dad, it's me, Erin, your most beautiful daughter.
Just like your mother.
That's right. Don't tell my sister.
I wouldn't dare.
Oh, hi, sweetie pie.
That's my girl.
She keeps you good company, doesn't she?
Yes, she does.
Oh, she's a good old girl. Looks like you two have had a comfortable day.
We've done okay.
So, Dad, I was thinking we should go out and get a burger.
Sounds good.
Are you up for McDonald's?
Yeah, I'll have a Coke.
Yeah, I think Sweetie Pie wants to come along.
She would.
Dad, it's a little cold today, a little snow in the air. Probably should get you ready for the weather.
Good idea.
I'll take your tea. We'll warm it up or make a fresh cup when we're back.
Good idea.
Dad, I'm gonna fold this up carefully.
You know, your mother made it.
That's right, I know she did. We're not gonna let this get on the floor.
No,
Probably got some cat hair though.
my favorite blanket.
Right there, Dad. Dad, let's put your shoe on, okay?
Sure.
Right here. Got it? You're a regular Cinderella. Here's one more for you, Dad.
Okay.
Okay, Dad. I'm gonna, first of all, I want you to put your hands right here and then right there.
Okay.
Dad, I'm gonna count to 3. And on the number 3, you push up. Okay?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Stiff.
You steady?
Much better.
Okay. Dad, here's your hat. Okay. Oh, looking good. We'll put your jacket on when we get downstairs, okay?
Okay.
If it's okay with you, maybe we'll do a few errands.
Get some fresh air.
Yeah, get some good fresh air.
Yeah.
So as you watch the photos or watch the video and you look at the photos, I hope that you caught that moment. And I apologize. I think we are not going to use the chat box again in the interest of time, but I bet so many of you caught that moment. You see his facial expression. He doesn't know exactly which daughter it is. Even as she gets down at his eye level, you still see his facial expression. He doesn't quite know who she is. She smooths it over. She says something like, "It's me, Erin, your most beautiful daughter." Or, "It's me, Erin, your favorite child." She uses that bit of humor to graciously save him from embarrassment or having to figure out which daughter it is. Other things that I think you likely saw were how much slower her pacing was this time around. So let's look at some of those actual communication skills. Oh, I forgot to mention something. When we made these videos, we did not intend for our pets to take these little starring roles. But you've seen our cat and you've seen our dog, because when we tried to video with them put in separate rooms, it was a disaster. And I'm glad now that it turned out that way, because the interaction and the relationships between animals and the people we care for is profound. A lot of my work over the years has been with the veterans homes in Minnesota. And I worked in a very small veterans home, even though they were small. This was up in northern Minnesota. They had 4 or 5 cats that lived there on any given day. They had probably 3 or 4 quite large dogs that didn't live there, but they came in with their owners each day. And people at first thinking about this in a skilled nursing home might go, oh my gosh, doesn't it create fall hazards? Or what about allergies? Or what about people that don't like them? Animals know. Animals are so intuitive. Animals know who wants them close and who doesn't. Animals know who needs them the most. And those spontaneous interactions all throughout the day with the cats, with the dogs, brought so much life and energy into the place. And I know that the veterans home that I was at is not unique. This is a big part of best practices in memory care, is to have uh, not just animal therapy. Animal therapy is important, but animals around us. And so you see that my husband, that is his cat, Sweetie Pie. I mean, it's our cat, but it's his cat, if you know what I mean. Our dear old girl is 19 years old. And if my husband were to be in a residential setting someday for memory loss, what would be a very essential part of his care? A very essential part of his care would be having a cat, or maybe a cat and a dog. But let's look at some of those strategies that the daughter used. You didn't get to see this, but I'll tell you all about it. Before she walked in, she took those deep breaths. My dad lived on Wing C at the very end, which was the furthest walk you could possibly take in the nursing home that he lived in. And I would usually choke up and feel all the tears wanting to burst out of my eyes when I pulled into the parking lot. And I knew I couldn't walk in with him seeing me like I've been crying. So I took some deep breaths in the car and I carefully used my tissues. In the walk to the front door, I took as many deep breaths as I could because it was fresh air. By the time I got to the reception desk, I was at least not looking miserable. And on that long walk to the C wing, I started to focus on sparkling. Sparkling means we have that twinkle, that energy, that curiosity. It doesn't have to be a big smile, but that's the energy we want to bring to it. So we have to carefully monitor our facial expression, our body language, and our tone of voice. You notice that the daughter did not say, "Oh, Dad, you know who I am." She didn't quiz him. She didn't remind him. She just said, "Oh, it's me, Erin, your favorite daughter." It's these lighthearted jokes. There were times when you saw me or saw the daughter using simple statements. We're going to define a simple statement as 7 words or less. She especially used this in times when she was providing instruction. If you went back, you might hear her say, "Dad, let's put your shoe on." Okay? 7 words, zip it. Wait, 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 wait. I say 7 words is a general rule. The person you are caring for may be able to process more than 7 words, or they may be able to process fewer. Sometimes we've called it the 7 and 7 rule. 7 words, and then waiting a good 7 seconds or so for the person to process, understanding that that changes as well. And notice there were points when she was giving instruction that she avoided questions. Instead, she used statements. She didn't say, "Dad, can you put your hat on?" She said, "Dad, here's your hat." She used good vocal quality too. She spoke up. Sometimes we get so hushed that the person just can't hear us. If you were an infrequent visitor for a person who has a cognitive difference, please treat every interaction as if it might be the first time or a very long time. Quizzing is not helpful. What's my name? You remember me, don't you? Instead, offer your name and a little bit about yourself. The key strategy we've talked about, though, through all of this is while there are skills that are important, it's authentically stepping into this person's world and validating what they're experiencing that is the key to all of this. A couple of practice ideas, and I used all of these and then some. I would walk in sometimes, Dad, it's me. Your golden child has arrived. And my dad would burst into laughter. We don't want to walk in just being kind of level in a lot of cases, because that doesn't create the energy that we're looking for. While we're talking about simple statements, instead of questions, have you had a good day? Well, the answer to that very often is going to be grumble, 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 grumble. Instead, I hope you've had a good day. Instead of what did you have for lunch? I heard you had chicken for lunch. Instead of saying, is your back hurting? It looks like your back is sore. These are all much more effective ways to communicate with a person who's had cognitive differences. You may be struggling with bath or shower situations. I'm watching that time. I know I'm so close here. What I would say is the use of simple statements in bath or shower situations isn't about saying this just one time. I'll keep you warm, okay? And then moving on. If the person is fearful of being cold, it's said repeatedly throughout the shower. I'm going to keep you good and warm. I won't let you get cold. I'm going to keep you warm. All throughout the shower. When we've coached for this in residential settings, I can tell you that this is not the one strategy. It's one of many, but it's a strategy that helps. It's really the power of suggestion is what one of the nursing assistants that I worked with recently, what she called it. Finally, let's talk a little bit again about the pleasant conversation versus delight. I think we've all been told to use positive wording instead of negative wording. Use a positive approach instead of a negative approach. But I'd like to frame it a little bit differently. I'd like to talk about using delight. In this scenario, you're going to see a person who lives in an assisted living memory care. His language skills are good, but his balance is poor. He's got muscle fatigue. He becomes easily winded, and he's unable to remember to use his walker. In fact, he's had 2 falls already this week. He cannot make the memory to use a walker. He's only had a walker for several months. He couldn't possibly make that memory. The nurse in this scenario is responsible for many, many people in this neighborhood. She is especially worried about him falling on her shift. Nurses who are on this webinar, I know you don't want someone falling on your shift. So she watches him with an eagle eye, and we're going to see the type of language she uses.
Frank, stop. Frank, stop. You're supposed to use your walker, remember?
I don't need this damn thing.
Yeah, Frank, you have to use this. It's not safe for you to walk without it.
No, I don't.
You don't want to fall like last night. Come on.
I didn't fall.
Frank, come on. You have to use it. You know that. Are you going down to lunch? All right, you use this, okay?
Thousands and thousands of times I've seen this, and maybe you've seen it too. It's the harried, stressed, worried healthcare professional who comes racing to save the person from a fall. And when I teach dementia communication, when I coach it in real life, caregivers often will say, well, that's all great, Erin, but we can't do it if the person's going to fall. I mean, we can't be positive if the person's going to fall or if they're going to hurt themselves. Like, we have to save them from hurting themselves. So let's look at this a different way, because she saved him from the fall there. But in doing so, she probably struck up his cortisol, his stress chemical, his fight or flight, because she came from behind, she grabbed from behind, she used scolding statements. She really meant well. She wanted to save him from the fall, but she gave him quite a boost of cortisol. And if he gets that cortisol boosted all throughout the day, boost, 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 boost of all these stress chemicals, we are going to see that right around sundowning time. So let's look at a way that she can save him, not have the fall, and actually use the skill of delight.
Oh, Dr. Henderson,
How'd you know that?
your daughter told me. The most famous doctor in all of Maryville.
Oh, she's a good one.
Dr. Henderson, I think we forgot something.
What would that be?
Your old buggy.
What?
Let me show you.
Walk with me, sir.
Okay.
You're steady. Dr. Henderson, this old buggy.
This damn thing.
I know. Okay, let's make sure you're steady, doctor.
All right.
Okay, have you got your breath, sir?
Yes, I do.
Take a breath. Okay. I bet you're going for coffee.
You know it.
All right. Just down here. You know the way.
All right.
Again, in the interest of time, we won't use the chat box, but I bet you caught it. And if you didn't, you're going to catch it here in these still photos. The nurse's approach was still fast, but she came from the front. And the face that he saw was a face of delight. It was not a face of stress. It was a face of, oh, I've just bumped into you. How fortunate for me. I know the role play happened in my family room in my house, but we've done this thousands of times in the real world. And I promise you it works. We can be fast and we can be delightful. And that energy change is so important. She made some specific wording choices. It wasn't Frank, Frank, Frank. It was Dr. Henderson. Dr. Henderson. That name that he'd responded to all his life and the pride he had in being a doctor. She didn't use the word walker. She knew that his word was buggy and he didn't like the damn thing. That's important. I see very few people experiencing dementia who know the word walker. And I see very many caregivers saying, you've got to use your walker. Remember to use your walker. You got to have your walker. And the word's not there. So find out what the word is for your person if they have a word for it. Just a small note, my son, like a day after this, he was diagnosed with walking pneumonia. and,
Oh, wow.
right. He
That's
was
impressive acting, Erin.
right. And as we were filming this, he's like, Mom, I'm going to cough. I think I'm going to cough when we're filming it. And I said, excellent. We'll roll with it. When we find
Hey,
a
Erin,
light.
you know what I'm thinking is
Yes.
oh, sorry, I'm going to let you continue, but what we'll do is since we're it's okay we're in extra time because I think people are enjoying it. Paula, I want to ask, do you have a time requirement on our gift card winner that we want to do, and then we can continue and then do Q&A? I just want to make sure we have space for where you may need us.
Yeah,
If not, just keep going.
yeah, no, absolutely. Please, more importantly, keep going. I think everyone is here for this valuable information, and we will announce in the chat before we let everyone out the winner of the survey who is present here today. So, and
Awesome.
anything
Perfect.
else, yeah, regarding questions and follow-ups, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to follow up with you via email as well.
Perfect.
Thank
And
you
this is
so
being
much.
recorded and will be available on our website. And so don't feel as if if you have to go, you'll be able to come back to it. So Erin, after that commercial break, back to you, my friend.
Thank you. So we talked about using delight instead of no, or using delight instead of merely being pleasant or polite. Delight really is that energy that we want to use so much of the time. But we don't want to be trapped into preconceived notions of what should delight the person or what they should enjoy. We need to really be clear-eyed about what the person truly does enjoy. For several months before my dad moved to a nursing home, I will tell you, we tried and we tried and we tried. He lived at home with my mom, and we lived a couple of miles from them, and we tried so hard to make this work. My dad had increasingly had angers rooted in frustration and rooted in anger, rooted in it. He was failing, and he knew that, and it just created so much frustration. And there were times when it wasn't safe for my dad and my mom to be alone in the house together. At least I didn't think that it was. And there was a morning when mom described what was happening. I said, Mom, like, I'll come and get him. Like, I'll come and get him. Like, just don't worry. I'll come and get him. We'll take him to our house. I think I had a webinar that morning, actually. I had other things happening, but we were going to bring dad over to our house and we were going to make it work, and we were going to find delight. And I thought about music. Marvell mentioned earlier how important music is. And I thought, music, that's what we'll do. My dad really, really enjoys music. So I leaned on my husband, Chris, who plays just a little bit of guitar. And I think it's because I had the webinar, I had to be inside. I'm like, go outside, go outside. This was in July. And I peeked out the window at a certain point in this, and there's my husband strumming the guitar. There's my dad. And I've looked at this picture a number of times, and I honestly cannot determine who is more depressed, whether it's my husband, my dad, or my dog. I mean, there was absolutely no delight in this for anyone. When I came back a little bit later, and the next time I peeped out the window, I will tell you personally, I was kind of horrified to see this. Not personally, but my dad was out way in the back part of our lawn where we'd let a landscape feature get overgrown. I was horrified briefly because I knew my dad had significant late stage congestive heart failure. And I knew it was July, and I knew he'd need to be drinking so much water. And I was worried about that fluid. And I went out there ready to just maybe be stern with these two men, but I couldn't be. My dad was so happy. My dad was delighted. He was pretty sure the two of us never could keep up with all this house and this big yard. So he was delighted to be the guy out there helping us keep up with this big yard. I said to my husband, maybe quietly, I said, it's hot out here, and he's out. What are his fluid restrictions and all that? And he said, Erin, my husband said, Erin, you got to let your dad be your dad. And there was the delight. We had to let my dad be my dad. I knew a lot about reminiscent therapy. And boy, on my watch, my dad was going to be delighted to reminisce. And I laid out photos one day, and I wasn't asking questions, more just like a bubbling up. I don't want to use a crowbar here, but I wanted to bubble up with, oh, look at that, Dad. Look at cute little me in the back seat. I think that was the trip to California. My dad didn't say much. I'd say, well, Dad, look at cute little me. I was out in the yard with the goats. My dad didn't say much. My dad was having a little bit of a clear day that day, and he says, I know what you're trying to do. I said, oh, okay. He said, I feel bad saying this, Erin. He said, but I really don't remember any of that. I was so busy working all the time. So my idea of reminiscing wasn't going to work. There wasn't going to be delight in that. But when we came across this photo, I did not know the story behind this photo. My dad was actually a soda jerk, which is an actual term for a guy who used the bar and poured sodas at the pharmacy. And his boss let him buy the boss's Buick for $200. My dad told me a long and detailed story about this Buick and how well he took care of it. My son, who was then a middle schooler, found this Harley Davidson Buick on Amazon. And the number of times I walked into my dad's, ultimately into his nursing home room, and he was stroking that car. I mean, stroking it. He lifted the hood up and he'd slam the doors, and he just was so content. That was reminiscent therapy for my dad. We need to identify what truly creates delight for that person. My dad, music was a huge part of his life, and we were blessed in the year that he was in hospice to have a very skilled music therapist. And she helped us zero it in. My dad really had, although he loved countless genres of music in his lifetime, it was trucker songs. My dad drove truck, he had a trucking business. It was the songs he listened to in the early 70s, about the time he was between 26 and 36. She was able to figure that out. What created genuine delight for my dad was eating in a McDonald's parking lot. I brought him to my mom's house for dinner as often as I could. That created no delight. It was overstimulating. It was stressful. I brought my dad to our house for dinner, thinking he could be surrounded with his grandkids and the dogs and the cats, and it would be wonderful. It was not wonderful at all. It was too stimulating. It was too stressful. But just me and my dad in a car in a McDonald's parking lot, that brought him delight. He liked to play jokes, but he couldn't initiate them. So when I was visiting him, I would say, like, if I knew a nurse was coming, if we put on the call light or something, I'd say, Dad, play dead. My dad would dramatically play dead. I was horrified by it deep inside, but it's what brought him delight. And I encourage you, wherever you are at on this journey, to find that delight. Find that way to connect through those challenges and use every available resource that you have to ensure that you have rest and support. Because masterful dementia communication and delightful, finding delight when we're this tired and this stressed, it requires tremendous energy. It requires concentration. It requires patience. I gave you examples today of connecting with my dad. I could have given you many, many more examples of when I didn't connect with my dad. That's okay. Nothing is perfect in this journey. Be kind to yourself. If I were with you live today, I think there would be a handful of you who would come to the front of the room and you'd say, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I feel terrible. I did all those things you said not to do. If you're in that category of person, please let go of that. We all do the very best that we can do in each moment. None of us signed up for this. So be kind to yourself and knowing that you're doing the very best that you can. And I hope you found value in some of the tips today.
Wow. Erin, thank you so much. I would thank you more, but I want to make sure we give out our 2 gift cards and also wrap up today. Nicole, I think you're going to announce our one and maybe a bonus.
Yes. First off, thank you to everyone. The chat has been phenomenal. Really appreciate you guys sharing. Really wonderful conversations happening in the chat. So really love to see that. Yes, the gift cards. Excited that we are going to be giving away 2 gift cards in the amount of $50. And our first winner is going to be Angelina Young. And our second winner is going to be Susanna Hicks. So thank you again. Congratulations to the winner. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much. Should how do folks, should they reach out to you directly, Nicole?
Yes, I will reach out to both of them with my email address, and then they can shoot me an email and we'll go from there.
Awesome. So just a quick reminder about our help desk that you can reach out to from calling, or you can web chat at caregiveraction.org, or you can also email us. Again, reminder about the agitation and Alzheimer's screener for caregivers at www.baasc.org. a really spectacular tool. An additional thanks to our sponsors for today, from Lundbeck and Otsuka. A huge thanks to Erin. Thank you for taking all this time, taking for extra time for today. We really appreciate it today. And we know we did not get to as robust of a question and answer session as we wanted to, but what I'll leave you with in some of the questions that I've seen coming up, and we also will gather these questions and try to pull together something that answers some of them, perhaps in a either in a document or in a extra time session we may do. But keeping in mind that what is the person trying to tell you? And I think I saw in one that, they believe that their husband is alive and they want to catch a flight. That person's telling you that they miss their husband. And how can you really connect with them in that way and have them reminisce perhaps about it? But what we'd offer to you over and over again is provide the grace and space to yourself to know that, you're not meant to be born and have this figured out. This is tough. This takes energy and time. But what I will tell you is that looking at Erin, that's probably got 30,000 hours under her belt. I've got 10,000 under mine of working with this, and but know that it can greatly improve your success of communicating with your loved ones. So thanks everybody for taking the time today. Erin, thank you again for taking the time, and for the entire team at Caregiver Action Network. We appreciate you. And this will remain on our website for quite a while. So please, you're welcome to use it in any way you'd like to. It's of no cost, thanks to our supporters. And you can check that out. Once we post it, we'll also send out an email to everyone that signed up. So thanks so much for participating, and take care. See you later, Erin.
Thank you.